Montana Territory, 1875. The unforgiving frontier stretched across the valley like a beast slumbering beneath a patchwork quilt of golden wheat fields, pine forests, and rugged mountains. A land where the weak perished and the strong sometimes merely survived. This was no place for softness, for sentimentality, for love. At least that's what Owen Tucker had spent his 25 years convincing himself. Owen straightened his worn leather vest and adjusted his Stetson lower over his deep blue eyes as he guided his chestnut gelding down the steep trail into Silvercreek. The town had sprung up like a stubborn weed in the shadow of the Bitterroot Mountains, first a mining camp, now struggling toward something resembling civilization. His lean, muscular frame swayed naturally with his horse's movements, the result of spending more time in the saddle than on his own 2 feet. "Almost there, Rusty," he murmured to his horse. "Then we part ways with this cursed cattle drive for good." 2 months on the trail had hardened the already calloused edges of Owen's heart. He'd seen 2 men trampled during a stampede, watched another die slowly from a snake bite, and buried a fourth after outlaws had ambushed their camp. The frontier took more than it gave, and Owen had learned young that getting attached only made the inevitable losses more painful. As the last hired hand on a cattle drive that had started in Texas, Owen's pockets finally held enough money to stake a small claim for himself. A solitary cabin, far from the demands and disappointments of people. That was all a man needed on the frontier. That was safety. The thought of relying on others, of letting anyone close enough to matter, made his chest tighten uncomfortably. His father's words echoed through his mind. "The only person you can count on in this world is yourself, boy." The last curve in the trail revealed Silvercreek sprawled below, a main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a church steeple rising like a finger pointing accusingly at the sky, and scattered homes and businesses spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Owen's gaze lingered on the distant mountains. Somewhere up there waited his future, alone but secure. The crack of a gunshot jerked Owen from his thoughts. He instinctively ducked low in the saddle, scanning for danger. The sound had come from a narrow ravine just east of the main trail. Drawing his Colt revolver, Owen nudged Rusty forward, alert for any sign of trouble. The ravine cut a jagged path through rocky terrain, with scrub brush providing occasional cover. Around the bend, the scene unfolded quickly. A woman struggling with 2 rough-looking men beside an overturned buggy. Her chestnut brown hair had come loose from its pins and flew wildly about her face as she fought. Despite her obvious terror, she was landing solid blows against one assailant while trying to keep the other at bay. "Give me that damn necklace," one man snarled, yanking at something around her neck. "Let go of me," the woman's voice was strong despite her predicament, her green dress torn at the shoulder where one of the men had grabbed her. Owen took in the situation in seconds. The woman couldn't be more than 20 or 21 years old, wearing a fashionable traveling outfit now covered in dust. One attacker had a revolver drawn but seemed reluctant to shoot, likely wanting to avoid attention so close to town. Without hesitation, Owen fired a warning shot over their heads. "Let the lady go, gentlemen." Both men whipped around, the one with the gun turning toward this new threat. Owen didn't give him time to aim, firing again and catching him in the shoulder. The man howled, his weapon dropping to the dirt. The second attacker lunged for the fallen gun, but Owen was already spurring Rusty forward, closing the distance in seconds. "Next one goes through your skull," Owen said, his voice eerily calm as he aimed squarely between the second man's eyes. "Step away from the lady, now." Something in Owen's steady gaze convinced the robbers that this particular cowboy wasn't bluffing. The wounded man clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "Crazy bitch ain't worth dying for," he spat, backing away. "Come on, Lloyd." Owen kept his revolver trained on them as they scrambled up the ravine slope, disappearing over the ridge. Only when he was certain they were gone did he holster his weapon and dismount, approaching the woman cautiously. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, removing his hat. Up close, her beauty struck him with unexpected force. Beneath the dirt and dishevelment, her face was delicate yet strong, high cheekbones flushed with exertion, full lips pressed together in determination, and large hazel eyes that regarded him with wariness. "I'll survive," she said, straightening her posture and attempting to smooth her torn dress. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm she tried to project. "Though I believe I owe you my gratitude, Mr. Tucker." Owen Tucker, he offered a slight bow, and it was nothing any decent man wouldn't have done. "Rebecca Archer," she replied, extending her hand with surprising formality given the circumstances. "And I assure you, Mr. Tucker, many men would have ridden past rather than involve themselves in someone else's trouble. Her fingers were soft against his callous palm, yet her grip was firm. She withdrew her hand quickly and touched the silver locket at her throat, what the thieves had been trying to steal. That must be precious to you, Owen observed, nodding toward the locket. Rebecca's fingers closed protectively around it. It was my mother's. She passed when I was 14. I'm sorry to hear that. Owen shifted uncomfortably, unused to conversations that ventured beyond the practical. He turned his attention to the overturned buggy, assessing the damage. Those men tampered with your wheel, he noted, examining the splintered wood. Made it look like an accident. Planned ambush, Rebecca said grimly. They must have watched me leave town. Owen's brow furrowed. You were traveling alone. My father's driver fell ill this morning. I insisted I could manage the short journey to my aunt's ranch by myself. A rueful smile touched her lips. Not my wisest decision in retrospect. Owen helped her gather the scattered contents of her travel bag, then righted the buggy with a grunt of effort. The wheel was beyond repair. You'll have to ride double with me into town, he said. We can send someone back for the buggy. Rebecca hesitated, glancing from Owen to his horse and back again. I promise to behave like a gentleman, Miss Archer, Owen said, unable to keep a hint of amusement from his voice. It's not that, she replied quickly, a blush coloring her cheeks. It's just, my father is rather protective. Your father would likely prefer you return safely by any means necessary, Owen pointed out. And Rusty here is gentle as a kitten. After a moment's consideration, Rebecca nodded. You're right, of course. Owen helped her onto the saddle before mounting behind her, acutely aware of her nearness as they set off towards Silvercreek. He maintained a respectful distance as best he could, but each sway of the horse brought her back against his chest. The scent of lavender rose from her hair, a startling contrast to the trail dust and sweat he'd grown accustomed to. You're not from around here, Rebecca observed as they rode, her voice carrying over her shoulder. Just arrived, Owen confirmed. Finished a cattle drive from Texas. And now? Owen hesitated, planning to stake a claim up in the mountains. Build a cabin. Live quiet. Alone, there was something in her tone, not quite pity but close enough to make Owen stiffen. A man needs only himself and his wits out here, he replied, his voice harder than he intended. Rebecca fell silent for a moment before responding softly, perhaps, but there's a difference between what we need to survive and what we need to live, Mr. Tucker. The words landed uncomfortably in Owen's chest. He was grateful she couldn't see his face as they continued toward town, the first buildings growing larger before them. As they approached Silvercreek's main street, Owen noted how people stopped to stare. A few men removed their hats respectfully as they passed. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Rebecca seemed to shrink slightly against him. Where can I take you? Owen asked. The sheriff's office, she replied. We should report what happened. Owen guided Rusty toward a sturdy building with a wooden star mounted above the door. As they drew closer, a tall man with graying temples burst through the doorway, his face a mask of concern. A silver star gleamed on his chest. Rebecca, he called out, striding toward them. I've had men searching everywhere for you. Owen felt Rebecca tense before him. Hello, father, she said quietly. The realization hit Owen like a bucket of ice water. Sheriff's daughter. He'd just ridden into town with the sheriff's daughter pressed against him for all to see. Sheriff Archer's keen eyes traveled from his daughter's torn dress to Owen's face, his expression darkening. Get down from there, Rebecca, he ordered, reaching up to help her dismount. Owen swung down after her, suddenly very aware of the six-shooter on the sheriff's hip and the crowd gathering to watch the scene unfold. Father, this is Mr. Tucker, Rebecca said quickly. He rescued me when two men attacked my buggy on the eastern trail. The sheriff's posture shifted subtly. That so? Owen nodded, keeping his hands visible at his sides. Yes, sir, they tampered with her wheel, made it look like an accident, tried to steal her locket. Sheriff Archer's gaze softened slightly as he looked at his daughter. Are you hurt, Becca? I'm fine, father, thanks to Mr. Tucker. The sheriff turned back to Owen, studying him with narrowed eyes. I appreciate you bringing my daughter safely to town, Tucker. Not every drifter would have gotten involved. Wasn't about to ride past a lady in distress, Owen replied evenly. Something in the sheriff's expression shifted, a hint of approval quickly masked. Well, you've done your good deed, I'll handle it from here. Rebecca stepped forward. "Father, Mr. Tucker deserves more than a dismissal. The buggy's wheel is completely broken, and he left the cattle drive he was with to help me." Sheriff Archer sighed, stroking his mustache. "Fine, come inside, both of you. I want descriptions of these men." The sheriff's office was sparse but orderly, a desk covered with wanted posters and reports, 3 cells along the back wall currently empty, and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. A young deputy looked up from cleaning his rifle as they entered. "Found her, I see," he remarked, tipping his hat to Rebecca. "No thanks to you, Jenkins," the sheriff growled. "Mr. Tucker here saved her from being robbed on the East Trail." While Rebecca described the attackers, Owen stood uncomfortably by the door, hat in hand. He hadn't planned to spend his first hours in town inside the sheriff's office. The sooner he could collect his gear from the livery and head into the mountains, the better. "Sounds like the Milton brothers," the deputy said when Rebecca finished. "Been causing trouble up and down the territory." Sheriff Archer nodded grimly. "One's shot in the shoulder, you say?" "Yes, sir," Owen confirmed, "left arm." "That'll make them easier to track." The sheriff turned to his deputy. "Round up a posse, Jenkins. I want those men found before sundown." As the deputy hurried out, Sheriff Archer fixed his attention on Owen. "Were you staying, Tucker?" "Hadn't decided yet, just rode in." "The Silvercreek Hotel is comfortable," Rebecca interjected, "and Mrs. Holloway serves excellent meals." Her father raised an eyebrow at her enthusiasm but nodded. "It's decent enough. First night's on me, as thanks for helping Rebecca." Owen started to protest, but the sheriff waved him off. "I insist. Town could use more men willing to step in when there's trouble." Before Owen could respond, the door burst open and a well-dressed gentleman in his 30s rushed in, his face flushed with concern. "Rebecca. Thank heavens you're safe." He crossed to her side, taking her hands in his. "When I heard what happened." "I'm perfectly fine, Victor," she assured him, gently extracting her hands from his grip. "Mr. Tucker came to my aid." Victor turned, noticing Owen for the first time. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "The town owes you a debt of gratitude, sir." "Victor Preston," Sheriff Archer explained to Owen, "owns the bank. And has been courting my daughter for nearly 6 months now." Something uncomfortable twisted in Owen's stomach. Of course someone like Rebecca would have suitors, respectable ones with roots in the community, not drifters with nothing but a horse and a bedroll to their name. "Well," Owen said, placing his hat back on his head, "I should find that hotel and let you all get on with your day." "Nonsense," Victor interjected. "You must join us for dinner tonight. The Broken Spur serves the finest steaks in the territory. My treat to thank you properly." Owen looked to Rebecca, whose expression was impossible to read. "That's very kind, but—" "He accepts," Sheriff Archer cut in, giving Owen a look that brooked no argument. 7 o'clock sharp. And just like that, Owen's plans for a quiet departure were derailed. As he stepped back onto the street, heading toward the livery to stable Rusty, he tried to ignore the strange reluctance he felt about leaving Silvercreek. One night, he told himself. One dinner to be polite, then he'd be on his way to the solitude he'd worked so hard to earn. Yet the memory of Rebecca Archer's hazel eyes and her words about surviving versus living followed him down the dusty street, unwelcome companions he couldn't seem to shake. The Silvercreek Hotel proved modest but clean, with actual glass windows and a decent-sized room that represented luxury after months on the trail. Owen soaked in a real bathtub, shaved his stubble, and put on his only decent shirt, slightly wrinkled from being rolled in his saddlebag but presentable enough. He polished his boots and cleaned his revolver, an ingrained habit after years of frontier living. At precisely 6:45, Owen stepped onto the hotel's porch, squinting at the setting sun. The town had transformed in the evening light, windows glowing warmly, the rougher edges softened by dusk. A group of men exited the saloon across the street, laughing loudly, while a couple strolled arm-in-arm toward the church, where music suggested an evening service or social gathering. For a brief, unwelcome moment, Owen wondered what it might be like to belong somewhere like this, to have a place in the tapestry of a community rather than existing on its fringes. He pushed the thought away firmly. Such notions led to disappointment. Better to want nothing than to want what you couldn't have. The Broken Spur sat at the far end of Main Street, its large windows spilling golden light onto the boardwalk. Owen arrived to find Sheriff Archer already seated at a corner table, nursing a glass of whiskey. No sign of Rebecca or her banker yet. "Tucker," the sheriff acknowledged, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit."
Drink.
Whiskey's fine, Owen replied, taking the offered seat. A comfortable silence settled between them as the sheriff studied him over the rim of his glass. Finally he spoke. Jenkins found the trail of those Milton boys, heading north. They won't get far with one of them blading.
Good.
You handled yourself well today. Most cowboys I know would have emptied their revolver and asked questions later.
Owen shrugged.
No need to kill when wounding does the job. Sheriff Archer leaned forward slightly. You've seen your share of trouble, I'd wager. Some, Owen admitted cautiously, military.
Texas Rangers for a time.
After the war. The sheriff nodded slowly, thought as much, you've got the look. He took another sip of whiskey. What brings you to Montana territory? Change of scenery, Owen replied vaguely. Planning to stake a claim up in the mountains. Before the sheriff could press further, the restaurant door opened, and Rebecca entered on Victor Preston's arm. She wore a deep blue dress that complemented her figure perfectly, her chestnut hair arranged in an elegant style that framed her face. The fresh-faced beauty Owen had rescued in the ravine had transformed into a vision of frontier elegance. Owen and Sheriff Archer rose as they approached. Rebecca's eyes met Owen's briefly, a smile touching her lips before Victor guided her into a chair beside her father. Mr. Tucker, she greeted him, you clean up remarkably well for a cowboy fresh off the trail. Had plenty of incentive, Miss Archer, Owen replied, surprising himself with the ease of the compliment. Victor claimed the chair nearest Rebecca, his hand lingering possessively on the back of her seat. I ordered a bottle of wine from California, he announced, a special vintage to celebrate Rebecca's safe return. Dinner progressed with surprising pleasantness. The steak was indeed excellent, and conversation flowed more easily than Owen had expected. Sheriff Archer shared stories of the town's early days, when Silvercreek had been little more than a collection of tents and hopeful miners. Victor spoke at length about the region's growth potential and his plans to expand the bank's operations. Throughout the meal, Owen found his attention repeatedly drawn to Rebecca. Unlike many women he'd encountered in frontier towns, she engaged fully in the conversation, displaying a sharp intellect and surprising knowledge of everything from cattle ranching to territorial politics. My daughter reads excessively, Sheriff Archer explained when Owen commented on her understanding of a recent territorial dispute. Even subscribed to newspapers from as far as Chicago and San Francisco. The world doesn't end at the territory borders, father, Rebecca replied with practiced patience. Knowledge is a worthy pursuit, Owen offered, especially out here where most folks are struggling just to survive. Rebecca's expression brightened. Exactly, the frontier needs more than just strong backs, it needs minds looking toward the future. Speaking of futures, Victor interjected smoothly, have you given more thought to my proposal, Rebecca? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Sheriff Archer cleared his throat and became intensely interested in cutting his steak. This is hardly the time or place, Victor, Rebecca said quietly, a flush rising to her cheeks. Owen suddenly felt like an intruder on a private moment. He shifted in his seat, considering an excuse to depart. Nonsense, Victor persisted, oblivious to her discomfort. Mr. Tucker should understand the full picture of our community. Rebecca and I have been discussing the possibility of marriage for some time now. Victor, Rebecca's voice carried a sharpness that hadn't been there before. Owen kept his expression carefully neutral despite the unexpected disappointment that settled in his chest. Congratulations, he managed. Nothing's been decided, Sheriff Archer cut in gruffly. My daughter isn't one to rush important choices. Victor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, I simply mean that Rebecca would be an ideal banker's wife. She has the education, the social graces, and the family standing. You make me sound like a prize mare at auction, Rebecca said, her voice deceptively light. Owen couldn't suppress a small smile at her retort. Their eyes met briefly across the table, and he saw something there, a flicker of shared understanding that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Victor, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued expounding on his vision for Silvercreek's future, with himself and Rebecca as the town's premier couple. Owen noticed how she withdrew slightly, her earlier animation fading as Victor spoke of the home he planned to build for her and the social functions they would host. When dinner finally concluded, Owen found himself walking slightly behind the others as they exited the restaurant. The night air had turned cool, stars emerging in a velvet sky above the town. I'll see Rebecca home, Victor announced, offering his arm to her once more. Actually, Sheriff Archer interrupted, I need a word with my daughter. Official business about those robbers. Tucker, would you mind accompanying Mr. Preston back to the bank? He mentioned wanting to show you something. Victor looked momentarily displeased but recovered quickly. Yes, of course. I'd be happy to give Mr. Tucker a tour of our financial establishment. Perhaps discuss investment opportunities for whatever gold you might find in those mountains. Owen glanced questioningly at the sheriff, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Lead the way, Mr. Preston, he said, falling into step beside the banker. As they walked, Victor's cordial dinner demeanor gradually slipped. You know, he said in a conversational tone that didn't match the sharpness in his eyes, Silvercreek is developing into a respectable community, the sort of place where people know their proper stations. Is that so? Owen kept his voice neutral. Victor stopped walking, turning to face Owen directly. Rebecca Archer is destined for better things than becoming some miner's wife or, heaven forbid, following her father into law enforcement. She needs a man of position, of stability. Owen met his gaze steadily. Seems to me Miss Archer is capable of deciding what she needs for herself. She's young, impressionable, easily swayed by romantic notions and heroics. Victor straightened his already impeccable lapels. I'm simply advising you, as someone who has Rebecca's best interests at heart, not to mistake gratitude for something more significant. The implication hung in the air between them. Owen's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression impassive. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Preston, but I assure you I have no intentions beyond leaving for the mountains as soon as possible. Victor studied him for a long moment before his smile returned, artificial as fool's gold. Excellent, then we understand each other. The bank is just ahead, but perhaps the tour can wait for another time. Good evening, Mr. Tucker. With a curt nod, Victor continued down the street alone, leaving Owen standing in the pool of light from a street lamp. The encounter left a sour taste in his mouth, though he couldn't deny the truth in the banker's words. Rebecca Archer belonged to this world of civilized dinners and proper courting, not to the solitary existence Owen had chosen for himself. As he turned back toward the hotel, Owen spotted Rebecca and her father emerging from the sheriff's office further down the street. Something in their posture suggested tension. The sheriff gestured emphatically while Rebecca stood with her arms crossed, chin lifted in defiance. After a moment, Sheriff Archer threw his hands up in apparent exasperation and retreated into his office, leaving Rebecca alone on the boardwalk. Owen hesitated, knowing he should return to the hotel and prepare for his departure in the morning. Yet his feet carried him toward her before he could reconsider. Rebecca looked up at his approach, surprise flickering across her features before she composed herself. Mr. Tucker. I thought Victor was giving you the grand tour of his banking empire. Tour ended prematurely, Owen replied, stopping a respectful distance away. Everything all right with you and your father? A sigh escaped her lips. My father believes Victor Preston is the answer to every prayer he never actually prayed. Safety, security, respectability, all tied up with a banking bow. And you don't agree? Rebecca gazed down the darkened street. I'm grateful for my father's concern. After my mother died, raising a daughter alone couldn't have been easy, especially for a lawman. But, Owen prompted gently, but security without purpose feels like a beautifully decorated prison. She turned to face him fully. Have you ever wanted something you couldn't properly explain to others, Mr. Tucker? Something that made perfect sense to you, but sounded like madness when spoken aloud. The question struck closer to home than Owen cared to admit. He thought of his plans for solitude, how hollow they suddenly seemed when articulated to this woman with searching eyes. Yes, he answered simply. They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the saloon piano drifting faintly through the night air. Would you walk with me a while, Mr. Tucker? Rebecca finally asked. I find I'm not quite ready to return home yet. Every instinct warned Owen to decline, to retreat to the safety of distance and detachment. Yet he heard himself reply, I'd be honored, Miss Archer. They strolled slowly along the boardwalk, keeping to the main street where the occasional passerby ensured propriety. Rebecca pointed out buildings and shared stories of the town's growth, the schoolhouse where she sometimes taught reading to the miners' children, the small lending library she'd helped establish in a corner of the general store, the community hall where she organized literary discussions that gradually attracted even the most education-suspicious settlers. You've built quite a life here, Owen observed, Pieces of one, she corrected, but there's so much more I hope to do. Such as? Rebecca hesitated, as though weighing whether to share something precious. I've been writing to the territorial governor about establishing a proper school with qualified teachers, perhaps even a small college eventually. The frontier needs education as much as it needs gold and cattle. The passion in her voice stirred something in Owen, an admiration for ambition untainted by greed or self-interest. You'd make a fine teacher yourself. That's my hope, she admitted, though Victor believes a banker's wife has no business in a schoolroom. And your father wants whatever will keep me safe and close to home. A sad smile crossed her lips. After nearly losing me to consumption the same winter my mother died, he's been protective. Can't blame him for that, Owen said softly. They had reached the edge of town where the boardwalk ended and the wilderness began. Rebecca stopped, looking out at the darkened landscape. What will you do in those mountains, Mr. Tucker, besides hiding from whatever you're running from? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Who says I'm running from anything? Everyone on the frontier is running from something, she replied, or toward something so desperately it amounts to the same thing. Owen removed his hat, running his fingers through his hair before responding. My father was a hard man. Taught me that depending on others was weakness. The war reinforced the lesson, showed me how quickly communities can turn on themselves, how fragile the bonds between people really are. So you chose solitude as armor. It wasn't a question, and the insight in her words made Owen uncomfortable. It's simpler, safer. Safer isn't always better, Rebecca said gently. Sometimes it's just less. Before Owen could respond, a shout came from down the street. They turned to see Sheriff Archer striding toward them, his expression thunderous. Rebecca Josephine Archer, he called out, what do you think you're doing? Having a conversation, father, she replied calmly as he reached them. Unchaperoned at this hour with a man you barely know, the sheriff's face flushed with anger. Have you lost your senses? We're standing in plain view on Main Street, Rebecca pointed out reasonably, hardly scandalous. Sheriff Archer turned his glare on Owen. I expected better judgment from you, Tucker. The fault is mine, sir, Owen said, replacing his hat. I apologize if I've caused any concern. You should return to the hotel, the sheriff said tersely, and Rebecca, you're going home. No. Rebecca's posture stiffened, but she nodded. Good night, Mr. Tucker, thank you for the conversation. As Sheriff Archer led his daughter away, Owen caught the backward glance she cast over her shoulder, a look containing equal parts apology and something warmer that he dared not interpret. Owen slept poorly that night, his dreams a confusion of cattle stampedes, running gunfights, and hazel eyes that seemed to see through his carefully constructed walls. He woke before dawn, his decision firm. He would gather his supplies and leave Silvercreek immediately. The sooner he reached the mountains, the sooner he could return to the clarity of solitude. The town was just coming to life as Owen led a freshly saddled Rusty from the livery, saddlebags packed with provisions for the journey. A week's worth of supplies should get him far enough into the mountains to find a suitable location for his claim. Leaving so soon? Owen turned to find Sheriff Archer leaning against a hitching post, watching him with unreadable eyes. Best time to travel, Owen replied, adjusting Rusty's saddle. Wanted to thank you for your hospitality. The sheriff nodded slowly. Got your destination picked out. North Fork of Elk Creek, heard there might be good prospects there. It's promising country, Sheriff Archer agreed, also remote. Dangerous for a man alone. Owen met his gaze steadily. I've managed so far. No doubt, the sheriff straightened, hands resting on his gun belt. But managing isn't the same as living, is it? The echo of Rebecca's sentiments from the sheriff's mouth caught Owen off guard. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the direction of the sheriff's office, shouting, then the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Sheriff Archer was already running, drawing his revolver. Without hesitation, Owen secured Rusty to the nearest post and followed, his own gun in hand. They rounded the corner to find the deputy Jenkins, taking cover behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around him. Across the street, two men fired from behind an overturned wagon, one with his left arm in a crude sling. Milton Brothers, Jenkins called out when he spotted them. Came back for revenge. Damn fools, the sheriff muttered, positioning himself at the corner of the building. Tucker, circle around through the alley, we'll catch them in crossfire. Owen nodded, slipping between buildings while the sheriff provided covering fire. The town had come alive with the gunfight, doors slamming shut, women calling for children to come inside, men peering cautiously from windows. As Owen emerged from the alley behind the Milton's position, he caught sight of movement at the far end of the street. His blood froze in his veins. Rebecca was hurrying from the general store, seemingly unaware of the danger as she crossed directly into the line of fire. "Rebecca," he shouted, breaking cover, "get down." She turned at his voice, confusion giving way to alarm as she registered the overturned wagon and the armed men. The wounded Milton spotted her, a malicious grin spreading across his face as he recognized the woman who had fought back against their robbery attempt. "Well, look who it is," he called out, swinging his gun toward her, "the sheriff's little girl." Time seemed to slow. Owen lunged forward, knowing he couldn't reach her in time. A shot rang out not from the Miltons, but from Sheriff Archer, striking the wagon inches from the outlaw's head and forcing him to duck. Rebecca stood frozen in the street, her path to safety blocked by the crossfire. The second Milton brother seized the opportunity, grabbing her as she tried to run and using her as a shield. "Drop your weapons," he shouted, pressing his revolver to Rebecca's temple. "Or the girl dies right here." Sheriff Archer lowered his gun slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Let her go, Milton, this is between us." "Should have thought of that before you sent a posse after us," the wounded brother snarled, emerging from behind the wagon. "Now we're gonna take what we need and leave with her as insurance." Owen remained in position, his revolver still raised but useless while Rebecca was in the line of fire. Her eyes met his across the distance, wide with fear but remarkably steady. "You won't get 5 miles with a hostage," Sheriff Archer warned. "Every lawman in the territory will hunt you down." "Then maybe we should just finish this now," the wounded Milton replied, aiming at the sheriff. What happened next unfolded in heartbeats. Rebecca suddenly drove her elbow hard into her captor's ribs, then stomped down on his instep with surprising force. As his grip loosened in shock, she twisted away, dropping to the ground. Owen didn't hesitate. He fired twice in rapid succession, striking the wounded Milton in the chest and his brother in the shoulder. Sheriff Archer and Jenkins added their fire, and within seconds, both outlaws lay motionless in the dust. Owen rushed to Rebecca, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her entire body trembled. "I'm all right." Sheriff Archer reached them, pulling his daughter into a fierce embrace before examining her at arm's length. "What were you thinking, coming out during a gunfight?" "I didn't know," she said shakily. "I was picking up supplies at the mercantile. I heard shouting but not what was happening." The sheriff turned to Owen, his expression solemn. "That's twice you've saved my daughter, Tucker." Owen holstered his weapon, suddenly aware of the gathering crowd. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Sheriff Archer said firmly, "not anyone." He glanced at the fallen outlaws, then back at Owen. "Those were clean shots, the kind that come from experience and a steady hand." Rebecca was watching Owen with new understanding in her eyes. "You weren't always a cowboy, were you, mister?" "Tucker." Before Owen could respond, Victor Preston pushed through the crowd, his face pale. "Rebecca, my God, are you all right?" He reached for her, casting a suspicious glance at Owen's proximity. "I'm fine, Victor," she assured him, allowing him to help her to her feet. As the townspeople surrounded them, exclaiming over the shootout and Rebecca's narrow escape, Owen stepped back. This wasn't his world, this community with its concerns and connections. He caught Sheriff Archer's eye and nodded toward the livery, indicating his intention to continue with his departure. The sheriff gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head before turning to address the gathered citizens. Owen waited, uncertain, as Sheriff Archer directed men to remove the bodies and Deputy Jenkins to take statements from witnesses. Finally, the sheriff approached Owen, speaking low enough that only he could hear. "My office, 1 hour, we need to talk." It wasn't a request. Owen nodded reluctantly, watching as the sheriff guided Rebecca and a hovering Victor toward their home. An hour later, Owen sat across from Sheriff Archer, a cup of strong coffee in his hand. The office was quiet, the morning's excitement having subsided into the normal rhythms of the town. "Those men recognized Rebecca from yesterday's robbery attempt," the sheriff began without preamble. "Came back specifically to settle the score with her and you." "Foolish move," Owen observed. "Two against an entire town." "Outlaws aren't known for their strategic thinking." Sheriff Archer leaned forward. "But that's not why I asked you here. I want to make you an offer, Tucker." Owen raised an eyebrow, waiting, deputy position. The town council approved hiring another man after today's incident, and I need someone who can handle himself in a fight. The offer caught Owen completely by surprise. I'm not looking to pin on a badge again, Sheriff. Again, Sheriff Archer's eyes narrowed. So you were more than just a ranger. Owen set his coffee aside, was a deputy marshal in the Kansas Territory for 2 years. Before that, cavalry during the war. Why'd you leave law work? A shadow crossed Owen's face. Lost my partner to an ambush, couldn't save him. Understanding filled the sheriff's weathered features. And you've been running ever since, blaming yourself for something beyond your control. Owen didn't confirm or deny the assessment, but his silence was answer enough. Listen, Tucker, I can't promise this job won't come with its share of trouble. What I can promise is purpose, decent pay, and a community that looks after its own. The sheriff paused, including a certain deputy's daughter who seems rather taken with you. Heat rose to Owen's face. Sheriff, I assure you. Save it, Sheriff Archer interrupted, a hint of amusement creeping into his voice. I've raised Rebecca since she was born, know every expression on her face. And I know what I saw when she looks at you. She barely knows me, Owen protested, and Preston is a fine man with fine prospects who bores my daughter to tears, the sheriff finished for him. But that's her business to sort out, not mine. He fixed Owen with a steady gaze. I'm offering you the badge because this town needs good men. What you do about my daughter is between you and her, providing you both behave honorably. Owen sat back, mind racing. The mountains had represented escape, but suddenly the prospect of remaining in Silvercreek didn't feel like the trap he would have expected. It felt like possibility. I'd need time to consider, he finally said. Sheriff Archer nodded. Fair enough, positions open for 3 days. After that, I'll have to look elsewhere. He stood, extending his hand. Think it over. Owen shook the offered hand, then stepped out into the bright Montana morning, more uncertain about his path than he had been in years. Rather than returning directly to the hotel, Owen found himself walking toward the edge of town, needing space to think. The shootout replayed in his mind, not the danger or the violence, but the moment when he'd seen Rebecca in the street and felt a fear unlike any he'd known before. Not fear for himself, but for someone else. Someone who had somehow, in the space of a day, begun to matter. He'd walked nearly a mile when he heard hoofbeats approaching from behind. Turning, he saw Rebecca riding toward him on a dappled mare, her hair loosely braided and flowing over one shoulder. She wore a simple riding dress, practical yet becoming. My father said I might find you heading this direction, she called as she drew closer, though he thought you might have already left for the mountains. Owen stopped, waiting as she reined her horse alongside him. Still considering my options. So I heard, she dismounted gracefully, leading her mare by the reins. Deputy Tucker has a certain ring to it, don't you think? Your father told you about his offer. He didn't have to, she replied, falling into step beside him. The town council meets in our parlor, thin walls. They walked in companionable silence for a moment, the only sounds the crunch of gravel beneath their feet and the soft nickering of Rebecca's horse. Why are you here, Miss Archer? Owen finally asked. I thought you deserved to know the whole truth before making your decision. She stopped, turning to face him directly. Victor asked me to marry him formally. Last night, something cold settled in Owen's stomach. I see, congratulations. I haven't accepted, she said quietly, hope flared unwelcome in his chest. Why not? He seems stable. The word fell flat between them. Because stability without passion is merely existence, Rebecca replied, her gaze unwavering, and I've spent too much time existing when I want to live. The echo of their previous conversation hung in the air. Owen found himself studying her face, the determination in her eyes, the slight nervousness in the way she bit her lower lip, waiting for his response. What are you saying, Rebecca? I'm saying that when those men had me at gunpoint this morning, it wasn't Victor Preston I looked for. She took a step closer. It was you, a man I've known for exactly 1 day, yet somehow trust with my life. That's gratitude, not. Don't, she interrupted, don't diminish what I feel by calling it gratitude. I'm not some foolish girl swept away by heroics. Owen removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in frustration. What do you want from me? Nothing you aren't willing to give, she answered softly. But if you take that badge, if you stay in Silvercreek, I'd like the chance to discover if what I feel might grow into something true. Something worth building a life around. The honesty in her words struck Owen like a physical blow. This remarkable woman stood before him offering not demands or expectations, but possibility, the very thing he'd convinced himself he neither deserved nor needed. "I've spent years believing that depending on others is a weakness," he said slowly. "That caring only leads to loss. And I've spent years watching my father live half a life because he was afraid to risk his heart again after my mother died," Rebecca countered. "Is that really strength, Owen, or just another kind of surrender?" Her use of his first name, so intimate and natural on her lips, broke something loose inside him. The walls he'd built so carefully began to crumble under the weight of a simple truth. He didn't want to leave Silvercreek, didn't want to leave her. "If I stay," he began cautiously, "if I take the badge, there's no guarantee." "Life offers no guarantees," she interrupted gently. "Only choices." Owen looked past her to the mountains in the distance, their peaks sharp against the blue sky. The solitude they promised suddenly seemed hollow compared to the warmth in Rebecca's eyes. "I'll need to find lodgings in town," he said finally. "Can't very well be a deputy living up in the mountains." A smile bloomed across her face, transforming it with joy. "Mrs. Holloway at the hotel rents rooms by the month. And there's a small house behind the livery that might be available soon. The current tenant is moving to Helena next month." "You seem to have thought this through," Owen observed, unable to keep an answering smile from his own lips. "I may have made a few inquiries," she admitted. After all, a lady should be prepared for all eventualities. Owen laughed then, the sound surprising him with its ease. "And what about Preston? He won't take kindly to competition." Rebecca's expression turned serious. "Victor deserves honesty. I'll speak with him today," she hesitated. "This won't be easy, you know. My father will expect proper courting. The town will talk." "I can handle gossip," Owen assured her. As for proper courting, he took her hand gently in his, the touch sending warmth through his veins. "I'd be honored to court you properly, Miss Archer, with your father's permission, of course." "He'll make you work for it," she warned, but her eyes danced with happiness. "Some things are worth the effort," Owen replied softly. As they walked back toward town, Rebecca leading her mare and Owen matching his stride to hers, he felt a sense of rightness that had eluded him for years. The path ahead wasn't certain, there would be challenges, adjustments, perhaps even danger. But for the first time since the war, Owen Tucker wasn't running away from connection. He was walking toward it with clear eyes and an open heart. 6 months later, Deputy Owen Tucker stood on the porch of the sheriff's office, watching as Silvercreek prepared for its annual Founders' Day celebration. Banners hung from buildings along Main Street, children raced excitedly between makeshift game booths, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Sheriff Archer remarked, joining him with a cup of coffee. "Never seen anything like it," Owen agreed. The past months had transformed his understanding of community. What he once would have avoided as noisy and intrusive, he now saw as vibrant and welcoming. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Victor Preston had initially reacted to Rebecca's rejection with cold fury, threatening to withdraw financial support from her school project. But faced with unified opposition from the town council, led by Sheriff Archer himself, the banker had eventually relented, settling into a polite if distant relationship with his former suitor. Owen's courtship of Rebecca progressed with careful propriety under the watchful eye of her father. Sunday dinners at the Archer home, chaperone walks, and attendance at church socials gradually gave way to more private conversations and stolen moments that deepened their connection. With each passing week, Owen found himself more certain that the life he was building in Silvercreek, with Rebecca at its center, was far richer than the solitary existence he'd once craved. "There she is," Sheriff Archer said, nodding toward the schoolhouse where Rebecca emerged surrounded by children, her face animated as she directed them in hanging decorations. "Still can't believe the territorial governor approved her school proposal." "I can," Owen replied. "Rebecca can be very persuasive when she sets her mind to something." The sheriff chuckled. "Don't I know it?" He glanced sideways at Owen. "Speaking of persuasion, when do you plan to ask her?" Owen's hand instinctively moved to his vest pocket, where a small ring box had resided for the past week. "Tonight. After the fireworks." "About time," Sheriff Archer grumbled, though his eyes were kind. "She's been waiting long enough." As darkness fell over Silvercreek, lanterns illuminated the town square where couples danced to fiddle music. Owen found Rebecca standing at the edge of the gathering, her face lifted to the stars beginning to emerge in the purple twilight. "May I have this dance, Miss Archer?" he he asked, extending his hand. She turned, her smile warming him more than any fire could. I thought you didn't dance, Deputy Tucker. I've been practicing, he admitted. Mrs. Holloway has been a patient teacher. Rebecca laughed, taking his offered hand. In that case, how could I refuse? As they joined the other dancers, Owen marveled at how naturally they moved together, as if they'd been partners for years rather than months. Rebecca's green dress, made specially for the celebration, swirled around her ankles as he guided her through the steps. You know, she said as they circled the floor, a year ago I never would have imagined this moment. Being forced to dance with a reformed loner, Owen teased. Being happier than I ever thought possible, she corrected softly. The music ended and Owen led her away from the crowd, toward the small bridge over the creek that gave the town its name. Night had fully fallen now, the stars spread like diamonds across the velvet sky. I have something I've been wanting to ask you, Owen began, his heart pounding despite months of preparation. Yes, Rebecca replied immediately. Owen blinked. I haven't asked the question yet. I'm saving you the trouble, she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. The answer is yes, Owen Tucker, yes, I will marry you. A laugh escaped him as he reached for the ring box. You're supposed to let me do this properly. I practiced and everything. Oh, her hand flew to her mouth in mock surprise. Please continue, I'll act appropriately astonished. Instead, Owen pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Rebecca Archer, you turned my world upside down the moment you fought off those robbers in that ravine. You made me question everything I thought I knew about strength and weakness, about what it means to truly live. He drew back slightly, opening the box to reveal a modest gold ring set with a small diamond. I don't have much to offer except my heart and my promise to stand by you through whatever comes. Will you marry me? Tears glistened in Rebecca's eyes as she nodded. Yes, she whispered, with all my heart, yes. As Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, the first of the Founders' Day fireworks exploded overhead, sending cascades of color across the night sky. They stood together on the bridge, the celebration continuing in the distance, wrapped in the private joy of their moment. You know, Rebecca said, nestling against his chest as they watched the display, when that outlaw had me at gunpoint, I wasn't afraid. No, Owen stroked her hair gently. No, because I knew you wouldn't let anything happen to me. Just like I knew, somehow, that you wouldn't really leave for those mountains. Owen thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, suspicious, isolated, convinced that safety lay in solitude. That version of himself seemed like a stranger now. I almost did, he admitted, if your father hadn't offered me the badge. But he did, Rebecca pointed out, and you stayed. Best decision I ever made, Owen murmured, tilting her chin up to kiss her. As the fireworks painted the sky above Silvercreek, Owen Tucker finally understood what Rebecca had been trying to tell him that first night. That safety without connection was no safety at all, merely existence. Real living, rich, meaningful, sometimes frightening but always worthwhile, came from opening your heart to others, from building something that mattered in community with people who cared. The mountains would always be there, ancient and unchanging. But here in this growing frontier town, with this remarkable woman in his arms, Owen had found something far more precious than solitude. He had found home.